I mean, I'm just going to get started, really.
We live in a time when we can talk about almost absolutely anything.
We need to talk about...
From bowel movements to mental health. But there's still one thing we can't quite bring ourselves to talk about.
We need to talk about female... So when I ask you this next question, it's likely you've never answered this before because you've never spoken about it, is that right? We need to... Oh, my God!
And I went to a girls' school and it never, ever came up.
No, not with children. Never.
No.
We need to talk about female masturbation. Done.
She's changing from a child into an adult, and it's a little confusing at times.
Aged 14, I was the first person to bring the subject up with my friends, and it went down pretty badly. I set up my homemade confessional to figure out if we'd gotten any better at talking about wanking.
I'm sorry if you've ever done a religious one because this is going to be different. If I was to say the words female masturbation to you,
Yes,
what would the association be?
I'd giggle, probably.
Is it something you ever talk about with your friends or anything?
It's interesting. We talk about sex, but masturbation, nah, not really a topic.
Yes, it's embarrassing, isn't it? I'd like to think it was less embarrassing for younger women, but I gather it isn't.
Well, I was speaking to some of my friends and they said they would feel like utterly ashamed if anybody came in on them masturbating as opposed to having sex.
It's a bit hush. So, no, I think people would be quiet, look a bit awkward and change topic.
You know, even the fact that we have to have this little trippy board is like reflective slightly of the fact that, you know, we need a bit of protection to talk about this.
Yeah, I don't actually only talk to a select few people about it. I feel comfortable talking about it. I think the issue is not feeling that it's going to be received well by other people.
They're just like, oh, like they don't do it, but like you obviously do. Like, come on, like, so let's talk about it.
Caitlin Moran, let me start this then. I was going to say, you're a woman who talks about anything. The idea that you can just broach any subject and then talk about it, a lot of people would say that's a bit of your hallmark.
The thing with masturbation is, first of all, that's a horrible word. I can't not pull a face when I say it. Masturbation.
It sounds so medical.
It really sounds like a problem. It sounds like something mechanical. It's awful. But the reason I write about it so much is because when I was growing up, it was never talked about anywhere. So I was doing it a lot from the age of 13, but no one else seemed to be talking about it. So it got to the point where I was like, hang on, have I invented this? I
think every woman might think that.
Am I the wank master? Is this what I was put on earth to do? I must tell everyone else. This is great. It doesn't cost any money.
Can we please have a strapline, wank master?
Where's the wanking in Jane Eyre? Surely she must be. And then you'd watch the film Gravity with Sandra Bullock. And, you know, she's there in space, in her pants. Again, no Wi-Fi, nothing to do. Surely she'd have a little fiddle to take the edge off, you know? She's like facing certain death. Why are we not reflecting this when there's a world where American Pie has a man masturbating into a pie and seen by his parents, and everyone's like, oh, that's okay, because boys do masturbate.
Oh, Jen? There's still a thing from men that they don't actually think women do it.
Girls are just as ruled by their hormones as boys. And, you know, when I was a 14-year-old girl, I was roaming around and basically, you know, sort of my vagina was in charge of 90% of the time. It was kind of like the plant Audrey in Little Shop of Horrors, just kind of wandering around going, feed me, feed me.
Still, I've got to say, though, most people, even if they're really confident women, do well in life,
yes,
won't talk about this.
But that's not going to be the case in the future, mainly because talking about wanking is so funny. This is the great thing about culture. You want to change something, you don't argue whether it's right or wrong. You just make it cool. You just make it funny. You just have Amy Schumer talking about masturbation.
Well, guess who got a bottomless popcorn? Hello. Mr. Gray will see me now. Yes, girl.
It's just these little bits. You just make it funny. As soon as something's funny, you take the shame away from it.
That's all well and good, Caitlin, but where does this shame come from? Time to get a white-haired male involved in this conversation.
Christianity has been very good in filling people with shame about sex. The origins of sin in the Christian race came about because of the woman. So Augustine's picture of sex before the fall in the Garden of Eden is rather sweet. He said that Adam and Eve had perfect control of their genitals, so their sexual activity was calm and ordered. And then it all went wrong because Eve listened to the serpent, and the serpent said, "Eat of that tree that God has forbidden you to touch. Eat of the tree of knowledge." And so Eve went up to Adam and she seduced him by her beauty into eating of the tree of knowledge. So her sexuality was the root of sin, and that became a very distinctive Western idea. What has the Bible got to say about female masturbation? Nothing. It's got very little to say about masturbation at all. A few references in the New Testament, which are very difficult to pin down, and then a story in the Old Testament, the sin of Onan, and that's it. It's just not a subject which interested the writers of the Bible. So really, most of the discussion of this subject in Christianity is no more than 2 centuries old.
So it's a modern phenomenon then?
I'm off to see a woman about a book to find out where this stupid social conditioning really comes from. Da, 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 da. I feel like this is
spooky
like
Twilight Zone music.
I feel like you've got a magic book.
Well, in a way it was a magic book. It was a bad magic book.
Bad magic.
What we have here is onania, or the heinous sin of self-pollution, and all its frightful consequences in both sexes considered.
Okay, and what does onania mean?
Masturbation.
Right.
Or self-abuse, wanking. It brings a medical argument against masturbation, and this was first published probably around 1710.
So what would you say the impact of this book is?
This book had 200 plus years of making people feel very bad about masturbation, not just in the previous sense that it had been a religious sin and therefore, doomed them to hell. It brought about the idea that it was going to affect their health, and this goes on the idea that it's not just bad, self-indulgent or whatever, but that it's actually deleterious to health and well-being. And it starts off with it's very much about physical health. It's about it, debilitates the system, etc., etc.
What are the examples of what will happen to you?
Oh, there are all
if you
sorts of
masturbate?
Things that will happen, She finds that she has a swelling that thrusts out from her body as big and almost as hard and as long or longer than my thumb, likeness and size of a human penis erect. In the 19th century, you get the rise of the idea that it actually drives people insane, and you get masturbatory insanity as a diagnostic category in lunatic asylums. But by the early to mid-20th century, it's seen not so much as bad for health in itself, but it's seen as psychologically bad for forming healthy relationships.
God, I had no idea. I mean, you sort of hear people say things, and you wonder where it all comes from.
It all comes from this.
But what's the scientific thinking nowadays?
What do you want to know?
I love myself. I want you to love me.
For a long time, scientists, male scientists, were saying don't masturbate. But now, in our science in sexology, it's very obvious. We say, please, to all women, do masturbate. It's healthy for your body and for your mind and for your sex life. So please, do it.
So how regularly do you masturbate?
I did yesterday.
Good, solid.
If I'm feeling really horny, then maybe 4 times a week.
Maybe most days.
I have not a regular pattern, in fact.
Well, it's probably tailed off a bit.
Could be for months I don't do it, like 2 months, 3 months, and then maybe in a week a lot of times.
I used to masturbate a lot. Like, I was like a serial masturbator.
Even in the same day.
Like, I could have masturbated like 6-7 times a day.
It is a private thing, but it's not because it's a private thing that we should feel guilty about it and ashamed about it. We should open up, and that doesn't mean that we have to tell each other all our details.
So why so much masturbation?
What, are you telling me you never masturbate?
Don't even ask. How dare you?
It's difficult because masturbation, to us, it sounds very male. So we have to, if we say masturbation, it's about man, so we have to say female masturbation. And that doesn't sound very sexy, does it? If you don't have a good word that is not medical, that is respectful, and that is clear to talk about masturbation, female masturbation, how can we talk about it? Maybe we should make like a contest to find a nice, sweet, but clear word for female masturbation.
Let's talk about wanking! We're looking for a new name for female masturbation.
Well, Buff the Muff, apparently, that's one.
Having a fiddle.
Flicking the bean. Let me just check in the internet. Stroke the kitty, that was another one. I quite like wanking. Feed the pony as well, I've heard that.
Feeding the pony.
Floofing, or I call it me time. Self-love, how nice.
Self-love.
No shame.
No shame.
Buffing my fnur is another one that I like to use.
How do you spell fnur?
FNUH. Yeah, and I'm going to copyright that at some point. I need to make sure I get the revenue. We'll always be taking care of the business on these things.
Buffing the fnur, feeding the pony, flicking the bean, whatever you want to call it. We're probably never going to shout about masturbating from the rooftops, but it is time for us women to stop feeling so ashamed. In all my conversations so far, the best expression I've heard of it is definitely self-love. So it's time to own it.